Hey guys, I hope you're all doing really well. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video on my top 5 favourite poems from Rupi Kaur's The Sun and Her Flowers. A while back I did a very long video talking about my favourite poems from Milk and Honey, and I know I said that I would do the sort of second video to it from her second book. So I thought now was about the right time that I should do it, because otherwise I will forget. I have so many poems from her bookmarked. I have this book on my Kindle, I don't have a physical copy. So what I'm going to do is, if the poems have names, list them down below. This video should be nowhere as long as my last video to do with her, just because I'm just going to run through them all really quickly, and also because I only have 5, so I think that's a pretty decent number. So the first poem is called What Love Looks Like, and it's a long poem of hers, and I got to see her perform it when I saw her, which I think was back in March now. I think life is so spectacular because I think I've done a lot of amazing things this year, but somehow I still managed to get really down about my life, and I'm just like, I've done a lot more than I thought I would do, like in life in general. So this year has generally been quite exciting. But anyway, yes, I got to see her, she performed this, and it was really good. It's a long poem, and it's basically talking about her going to see a therapist after the breakup and what she thinks love looks like. What I like about a lot of Rupi Kaur's poem is that people can relate to them. I say this a lot of the times, but for me, poetry is about being able to relate to something. Or even if you're not able to relate to it, to see the beauty in the writing. However, if you don't understand the writing, you're just going to get lost. Rupi Kaur's writing is so simple that you can't really get lost in what she says. There's not a lot of metaphors or similes there. It's just kind of basic and things that you can sort of understand straight away, and it's more about connecting with that emotion that you have already felt yourself. In this poem, again, the language is really simple, really short sentences, and then she's just talking about what love looks like, and actually, had she had the time to reflect on that relationship a lot better while she was in it, actually she would have realised maybe love is not him, and yeah, why is she so heartbroken over this guy? One of my favourite bits is this realisation that she comes to is just basically like, love isn't this romantic thing that we've all put into our heads. It's actually this really simple thing that starts with us. And I know it's so cliched and annoying in this day and age where we're bombarded with all these things to do with self-love, but moving on from self-love, because even though this is connected to self-love, it's just a basic thing that you should know yourself and, you know, love yourself as much as you can, because I don't actually think it's the thing that you can do 100% or even know yourself 100%. But you should know quite a bit about yourself and the way you react to things before you get into relationships, so that you're able to say, okay, I act this way because of this, and hopefully the person you're with can understand. So that's what she's saying at the end. At the end of the day, you just have to learn that love is going to come from within. Once you're ready and you love yourself, naturally it has to progress outwards, and I really do believe that at some point it must happen. If it doesn't happen, I'll be like 40 coming on here like crying my eyes out. I won't be doing that, but you know what I mean. I just love that idea of just preparing women or men who have anyone who reads her poem for the fact that a lot of the times you're going to have to fill in those gaps, and we have to stop thinking that all of this love is going to come from outside. It's a very natural thing to think that, because you're brought up in a society where as a baby your every need is catered for, so naturally you think that's what love is. But actually, as you get older, you realise that's not the case. Even though you might try and replicate that in relationships, that's not going to work, because that person is not your parent. So that's what I ultimately like about that poem. I just think it's really great that she gets into it, and there's also some funny bits as well, but I really think that it's nice that at the bottom of it she's able to take that away from the poem but also give that to people who are reading and just say, love probably isn't going to be what you think it looks like. The next favourite poem of mine is on the next page from the poem that I just spoke about, but it is Location 128. And it basically is just saying, you cannot walk in and out of me as like a revolving door. If you're the kind of person like me, like, and I think a lot of people have this, at least a lot of people I know, you might have a lot of relationships with men, women, where it just seems to be really short term, and also these same people just sort of seem to dip in and out of your life. And I like this poem because this poem basically says that you cannot keep coming in and out of my life like a revolving door. She says, like, I have too many miracles happening inside me to be your convenient option. And I think it's just something a lot of women need to hear. Like, I'm not saying you need to be like really arrogant or super rude, but you just need to have some sort of firm grounding and just be like, actually, if you don't, and this is only in the case that if you want that from that person, if you don't want to be with me, that's completely fine, but you can't keep dipping in and out. So yeah, a huge fan of that poem. Do you see how quickly I'm getting through this? Only 3 more poems to go. So I had a hard time choosing my third poem, just because much like Milk and Honey, The Sun and Her Flowers is split into 4 sections. Can't remember off the top of my head what they are now, but I put them on the screen now as I'm speaking. But one of my favourite sections is called Rooting, and the reason I like it is because I feel for me it's very different to the poetry that Rupi Kaur was like very well known for, which is, you know, that sort of basic love stuff. In Rooting, it's all about her roots. She talks a lot about being the daughter of an immigrant. I think her background is Indian, and I just really relate to it. Also being the daughter of someone or parents that immigrated from Ghana to London, I understand a lot of what she says, and it's so interesting that when you're younger you just don't realise a lot of the sacrifices that your parents would have had to make for you, and that's natural. You're a kid and you're not that well aware of life, but then as you get older you begin to see how the world is actually pieced together, and you just really begin to understand like how hard it might have been. And yeah, it's just spectacular. I don't even have the closest of relationships with my parents, but it's still something as I've gotten older I can't even fathom like being my mum. So yeah, Rupi writes a lot about like what it's like to be an immigrant. She writes a lot about her mum and then the sort of struggles that her mum had being from, I think she must be Indian because she's Punjabi, yeah. Being from a Punjabi background, like having to leave her home and come to Canada, just so many things. But the one poem that really stuck out to me is called Broken English, and I think so many people who are children of immigrants can understand this, that obviously when your parents come here and they don't speak perfect English, like as a kid you are really embarrassed. The basic premise of the poem is her taking the readers through the journey of what her mum had to go through to get here, being pulled out of her country, coming here, having to learn a foreign language, having so many children somewhere where she didn't know how to speak the language or talk to anyone, and then it ends with like, so like how dare you like be ashamed when your mum still has an accent. She's basically saying cherish it, that's your home, that's your background, that's what makes your life so rich. It's just so nice, and she just basically says don't try and stomp that out of your parents. I think as you grow older you don't try and do that anyway, but it's just so wonderful, the poem. I think the appreciation she has for her mum and her parents and the things that they have gone through is so wonderful. That's why I think Rooting as an entire sort of chapter is beautiful, because not only does she talk about immigration in terms of her family, but she also talks about it in a wider context. There's also a poem that she's written about that 5-year-old who died, who drowned on the boat when he was on his way to another country. So it really does weave in different stories. There's also another poem, which isn't one of my favourites, that I'm just going to quickly talk about, which talks about the healing of little girls within the Indian community, and how actually she's done it in years, so like in 1990, but it actually starts way before that, and I would encourage you to read it. And it's simply because how it starts is like way back in the day, like a daughter is born, like the dad takes the baby and kills it. Then it goes on throughout the years, and it ends with like, oh, now like in Canada they don't tell the family of like Asian communities the sex of their baby until a certain time, because of stuff like that, because they want to avoid it. Obviously I don't know what still goes on in India, but it's just the sort of tying in of the different cultures and her background of like her parents' immigration that makes this chapter so powerful. I think it's beautiful. I think anyone can read it and sort of really empathize with it, but I just read it and I thought it was spectacular. I think it's just something that's very different from the rest of her stuff. My fourth favourite is On Location 1046, and it is basically a poem talking about raising a daughter. Rupi basically says, when my daughter's in my belly and I'm raising her, I'm gonna let her know that she is able to do anything that she sets her mind to. I just think it's so powerful. I know, again, we have this movement where, you know, we're really trying to encourage women, and I just think it's so very much needed. I think naturally as a parent, one of the things you do is you want your children to have a better life than you ever did. So I think this poem is just showing like how, as a mother, that this is always sort of the thing that's on people's mind, even though Rupi isn't a mother. but also how we just need to empower women. And I also really like this poem because I have quite a couple of friends that are just like, they never want to have girls. And it really annoys me because I know why they don't want to have a girl. Personally, sometimes I think like I don't want to have a girl because I wouldn't want them to go through any of the things that I've been through, like when it comes to men. But I just feel like maybe if you were a better individual as a man, you would want to have a daughter. Like maybe if you had better friends and better people around you. So I understand both sides of it, but if anything, it just makes me want to have a girl to sort of be like, you are just as worthy as a man of love, and you don't have to accept any of this disrespect. So I think it's just a really powerful statement for Rupi to put out there, especially because a lot of her audience are people who are accessing her poem online, I guess probably for the first time, and then they go on to buy her books and things like that. So I think it's just one of the powerful pieces that she's put out there, that when it comes to women, like, we do need to empower each other. So I just like it. I like a bit of girl power, and I don't know, I just think it's a very strong piece, and I think there will be certain women at a certain point in their lives that will actually really relate to this. Maybe it will actually deter some people from having that stupid idea that they don't want to have a daughter because they know what men are like. Because literally that's what my friends say, they know what men are like, so they don't want to have a daughter. And I'm like, surely the thinking should be you would raise better men. Like, not you don't want any more daughters or you don't ever want to have a daughter. It's bamboozling, but there we go. The world is filled with very, very weird people. But yeah, definitely a firm favourite of mine. And just makes me feel a bit like, oh, nice. Like, oh, if I have a daughter, like, yeah. Obviously, I'm not going to be here, like, read all this feminist literature every single day. But I'm just going to be a bit like, you're great. Just like you tell boys they're great. I'm sure you tell most of your kids you're great. And I'm sorry, I had to really apologise for my voice. I'm not sure what's wrong. Probably a lot of talking at my leaving drink, so I do feel like I've lost my voice a little bit. But the final poem, or rather it's more of a prose piece from The Sun and Her Flowers, is one of the pieces at the end of the book. So I think it actually falls out of the full chapters, but it's just the last thing, which I think is just a bit of her end word. And I'll read the beginning and then I'll go on to talk about it. And then there are days when the simple act of breathing leaves you exhausted. It seems easier to give up on this life. The thought of disappearing brings you peace. This is actually Rupi talking about her own experience of, I guess, maybe life after Milk and Honey came out, and just in general life. And I just really related to it a lot, because as much as sometimes life can be going really well for you, I think sometimes if you're an introvert, if you have depression, what a lot of people don't understand is, I think life is generally quite exhausting. It's a lot more exhausting when you have those two qualities. I guess in general with any mental illness as well, and I guess with any chronic illness as well. But I guess sometimes if you're the kind of person that is quite melancholy in general, life is just a lot more exhausting than it seems to be for other people. And what I like about this is the fact that she talks about it in such raw ways, and she also just says, you know, like, at that time the things that sort of brought her out of it was like a reader saying, like, you know, her poetry had saved her life. She basically goes on to say that, you know, she doesn't have it all figured out, but at the end of the day she accepts that she is a visitor, like, in this world, and like she has to do her best while she's here. She says living is difficult, like it's difficult for everyone, and I think a lot of people reading that would just be able to empathise with that and just recognise themselves in it, but also just realise, like, we're probably all struggling. Not saying all of us are, I know some people are doing just fine, but I think it's just a nice sentiment, and it's just something nice for people to remember at all times. And I have read that back so many times and just thought, okay, like, I'm a bit more grounded, it's not just me. So yeah, that's really what I liked about that poem. So I'm going to conclude there. It was really hard for me to choose my top 5, like really hard. It's also really interesting because I've read this so many times, and like when I've gone back at different times to sort of look at poems, I've looked at some of the ones that I would have bookmarked as favourites and been like, I don't really like that one anymore. So it's so interesting how your taste also changes, and this book I think has been out for less than a year, maybe a year, but so many books have, like, so many poems I've bookmarked or unbookmarked. So yeah, those are my favourites from Rupi. I really wanted to get this out and just encourage anyone who wanted to read her work to definitely pick it up. You might struggle through it, you might not like it, but at least you had a chance at reading it, and at least you know why you don't like it. I definitely like her poems. They make me feel like someone else out there gets how I feel, so I'm not a hater. So that is the end of this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I'm going to go ahead now and actually film my what am I going to film? Oh, my August like catch up reading vlog. But yeah, that is all from me today. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.